All right, guys, just want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here are doing a preview and prediction for an underrated matchup in the ACC between two unbeatens in the conference and number 20 SMU, 18th ranked Pittsburgh. 7.5-point favorites are the Mustangs, 58.5 total, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ACC Network, live from Gerald R. Ford Stadium in Dallas, Texas. Looking at the Pitt offense, this is a unit that's kind of slowed down since they entered conference play. Eli Holstein, he's been phenomenal this year since transferring over from Alabama. Game time decision, it appears. Of his injury the last 2 weeks, he's not been great, really. He didn't have to do much against Syracuse, though, so I guess that really doesn't matter. But against Cal, they got shut out in the second half, and he had two interceptions, completed 50%. If he's not able to go, Nate Yarnell will get the start. He started a couple of games at the end of last year. I thought he was solid for the most part, nothing spectacular, but I don't think this is just going to be the most massive fall off at quarterback. He's not going to look like a true freshman out there by any means. So I think Nate Yarnell can certainly handle the load of this offense, Nick. And of course, he has some nice pass catchers as well. You have 6 different guys that they really lean on. Gavin Bartholomew at tight end. Conta Mumpfield is their leading pass catcher. Desmond Reed will get him at running back. How good of a player is that? And then Sincere Lee and Kenny Johnson are 2 good ones as well. So if Yarnell is the one that starts at quarterback, Nick, which seems very likely for the Panthers, I'm confident in his abilities to, be able to stay out of the sticks, protect the football, and dish it out to a phenomenal group of pass catchers.
This is an offense that's been really solid this year. They've been really putting up solid numbers. Eli Holstein, under center Holstein, who was previously at Alabama. Bill O'Brien was a big fan of his when he was recruiting him out of high school, and Holstein had a lot of really solid things coming for him when he was out of high school. I think he was going to be a really talented player. He ended up redshirting at Alabama and then transferred into Pittsburgh, and he has been really good for this team so far. He's elevated this team to a higher level I think a lot of us expected him to. The 1,800 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, and 5 picks has been really good. I know he's dealing with the injuries, and obviously that's a really important factor when discussing this game. But he's been really good through the air so far this season. This team, the offense, 282 yards passing per game, 2.7, passing touchdowns per game. Really solid numbers. Has a really good and deep wide receiving room where you rattled off some of the names there that are really helping out on this offense for him. Holstein's looked good. I think Yarnell will be just fine. You plug him in as well. I'm not worried about the quarterback position. They're coached really well up there in Pittsburgh, and they're playing phenomenal football so far. This offense has been really fun to watch.
You look at a rushing attack, they'll have to be more than complimentary in this game for Pitt. Again, Desmond Reed, phenomenal transfer from Western Carolina following his offensive coordinator over to Pitt. And he's been great, 541 yards rushing, total of 7 touchdowns, 25 receptions for 341 yards. He had 11 receptions for $155 against UNC, also had 100-plus receiving against Cincinnati. So this is a legit dual-threat back. Holstein, he's a guy who's pretty solid with his legs as well, with 3 scores and over 40 yards per game. So his loss will be, more magnificent than just the passing game, as he's certainly reliable with his running ability as well. And you're going up against a tough SMU defense, of course. So Reed, Nick, he's going to be a big focal point of this offense, regardless of who the starter is.
Yeah, Desmond Reed's been phenomenal for this team. 541, 6.1 yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns, nearly 100 attempts on the season. He's been very effective. He's a really great receiver out of the backfield as well. 341, 13.6, and 4 scores on 25 grabs. So they use him in the red zone. He's a bit, he has got that wild card feature to him. He's really solid, a great running back for this team. Holstein's a really solid runner as well. He uses the field vision well, uses his legs when he needs to. Obviously he doesn't play. Yarnell can run, but not as effectively, so I certainly think that's part of the offense. Holstein kind of looks like Kenny Pickett in the way that Pickett used to be able to run pretty solidly when he was at Pitt. Definitely a similar mold there, in my opinion, between the 2 quarterbacks. I like what they can do on the ground. This is an offense that can run the ball 160 yards per game on the ground, 5.5 yards per carry. Solid numbers across the board. It really is the Reed and Holstein show. Daniel Carter is down there with only 14 attempts for 162 yards. So he does have a good average on his limited attempts. But, it's the Reed and Holstein show. It's a solid 1-2 punch. Obviously, if Holstein's not playing, that sort of changes the playbook a little bit, but I don't think it totally blows it out because Reed is a bell cow. He can carry the ball. He can really be effective for you.
Now you look at an offensive line that really has not been all that good this year. I think they're better than they were last year, which is really saying something because it was, not a great unit last season, of course. Branson Taylor at left tackle, having an all right year. I think he's probably the best here in pass protection. Him and then center Lyndon Cooper. At left guard, Ryan Jacoby really has not been all that great. And I think this right side's been even more worrisome with B.J. Williams and then Ryan Baer over at right tackle. What do you make of this unit, Nick? They've given up 8 sacks this year, 8 credited to the offensive lineman, that is, giving up a whole lot of pressure in terms of pass rushing, and now you're going up against an SMU defense that is incredibly deep in all regards.
Yeah, this is a poor matchup for this offensive line here for Pitt. This is a unit that's struggled at times this year. We got an SMU pass rush that's really effective, really speedy, a really solid unit with some solid players that can get around on the line. I'm worried about the two tackles. I look at Ryan Bearer at right tackle. He is a guy that I'm really worried about. BJ Williams, the sophomore right guard. I'm worried about him as well on that interior there. The left side, I'm not as worried about. The right side certainly worries me a lot. This could be a very poor matchup for Pitt here. They could really struggle in this one.
Now we move forward to an SMU offense. Early on in the season, they were abysmal. They were doing this whole two-quarterback system between Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone, and their offense just was leading to poor efficiency, and they ended up having a horrid game against BYU. They only put up 15 points, 261 yards at home, and it turns out that wasn't that bad of a loss, as the Cougars are now top 10, and that was the only L on the season. And then they turned to Jennings full-time, and they've been pretty good since then on offense. They've really found their footing. 450 yards now in 4 straight games. They had some issues against Duke this past Saturday. They're coming off 3 straight road games, Nick. They did have a bye week after the Louisville game. But now they finally return home, and this offense has found their footing. And you got to be very proud and excited potentially for what they have in store now that they're back in Dallas. Jennings, though, probably the worst game of the season for him now as a starter with 3 interceptions, completed only 54%. Before that, though, he's been a very efficient passer. 10 touchdowns, only 5 picks on the year. Of course, he's a bit of a dual threat player as well, 321 and 3 touchdowns. They don't utilize his legs a whole lot, even though he does have 9+ carries and it was like 6 straight games by now. But he certainly isn't the most efficient runner. But at times he can break free, and that's something your defense has to think about. Preston Stone was a good starter last year. Jennings, though, they like the upside in him. And do you believe that this was the ultimate right decision to go with? And do you think that his ceiling is going to continue to rise?
I wasn't really sure what Rhett Lashley was doing with this offense by running the 2 quarterbacks. We saw them struggle in a game against Nevada on week 0, where they were like 27, 28-point favorites and barely won that game. Then they lost to BYU not too long after that on a weeknight game. So it just seems like they were, struggling to figure out what they wanted to do at quarterback. Didn't make a whole lot of sense with the 2 quarterback system. Stone had a good year last year, but Jennings, I think, is the guy that has the more high upside and is playing better overall. 64% comp rate, nearly 600 yards passing, 10 touchdowns to 5 picks. Obviously, a bit of an issue. An effective runner, limited attempts, 67 attempts, 321, and 3 scores. I'd like to see him run a little bit more, but I understand why they're doing that, trying to protect him, trying to make sure he stays fine in that backfield. They also have a really solid back that they can rely on. This offense, now they're finally reaching the point where we expect them to be at. They're averaging more than 200 yards in passing and rushing per game, which is where you expect this high-click offense to be. They're very effective now. They're really running the ball strong. They're really throwing the ball better as well. This offense is firing on all cylinders, which they were not doing early on. They've started to come around a little bit. They had a big blowout win over Florida State. They had scored a lot against Louisville, blew out Stanford as well, blew out TCU. Struggled against Duke, but ended up getting the job done in OT. The offense had a bit of a weak game. I know Jennings had a bad game against Duke, but I like what this offense is able to do. They're able to move the ball. They're able to score a lot of points. Yes, it took a bit of an off day against Duke, but in general, this is a really effective offense, and Jennings has been really solid since taking over as a solidified starter.
201 yards per game for this rushing attack. Big-time transfer in Brashard Smith. He was with Rhett Lashley at Miami. He came over, converts the running back. 745 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's a highly explosive player. And this was a pretty deep backfield, but you're not really seeing it this year. Knighton's been out because of injury. LJ Johnson, only 41 touches for 198 yards. Of course, the aforementioned Jennings as well. There's some injuries here for SMU. Jake Bailey, probably not going to get to go in this game. RJ Maryland, they said, out for the year. So that's 2 of the top 3 pass catchers are down. Good thing is this is still an incredibly deep receiving room. Roderick Daniels, the second leading receiver. Keyshawn Smith has 3 touchdowns this year, as does Jordan Hudson. And, of course, Brashard Smith as a converted wide receiver. They might have to throw him out there in some different sets, some added snaps for him. And I'm confident in Moochie Dixon's ability to be a big-time playmaker. What do you think of this, Nick? Because I still think they're incredibly deep at wide receiver, but losing their 2 of the top 3 is certainly a big deal, especially Maryland, who really is their top pass catcher.
Losing Maryland is certainly a big blow. Smith has been a phenomenal back, 745, 6.4, and 9 scores. He's been really effective. LJ Johnson has been effective as well. Roderick Daniels has got some carries for this team as well. Losing Maryland, it certainly is a big issue, and I certainly think that is concerning when you look at the way that things go forward or throughout the rest of the season. But I think there are some other pieces here that can be solid. Jordan Hudson's pretty solid. Smith can also catch passes out of the backfield. He has a receiving touchdown. Dixon could be a good player. Keyshawn Smith's not that bad either, with his 3 receiving touchdowns and 15.6 yards for grab. Concerns me certainly aren't. We're losing some talented pieces in the wide receiving core is certainly an issue. In Maryland, that's a big loss because he's a fun target and he has 24 receptions on the year. But I think this offense can adapt and overcome. I like the balance they have running the ball. I like the balance they have throwing the ball. And I'm not too worried about that going forward.
Look at the SMU offensive line. Big news for them is they have a player in P.J. Williams who's playing at an outstanding level over at right tackle. Started the year at left tackle. He's capable of playing at both. Savion Byrd at left tackle, though, has been a big struggle in pass protection, giving up a lot of pressure there. But he's a really good run blocker. Logan Paul at left guard, like his abilities. At center, Ja'Kai Clark's having a really sound season. And then at right guard, Justin Osborne, you want to monitor his availability. He was injured last week as well. Ben Sparks would be getting to go at that spot if he's unable to play. O-line hasn't been spectacular, Nick. 5 credited sacks for them, but I think for the most part, this is still a pretty experienced bunch that I'm pretty happy with.
This is a solid offensive line. I like what this unit's been able to do. I think this is a unit that has enough production to be a solid unit for this team. I like what they have at left tackle. I like what they have at right tackle as well. I think this is a really solid unit overall. Savion Byrd's been really good for this team. I think the interior is strong as well, led with 3 graduate seniors that are all transfers from the program, previous transfers from the program. They're playing together now. A lot of veteran experience there across the board. I like what this offensive line's been able to do so far. They've created some nice running lanes for running backs and the quarterback to run.
Now you look at a Pittsburgh defense that's coming off, some phenomenal efforts. Big-time game against Syracuse, held them to 13 points, picked off Kyle McCord 5 times. A couple of those were tipped balls, but nonetheless, this defense was forcing plenty of mistakes. That brings up to now 10 interceptions. Did a pretty good job against Cal, held them to 15 points, were able to win that game. And then they didn't get completely demolished against Amari and Hampton before that. So this is a defense that's been very good as of late. Early on in the year, though, against Cincy and West Virginia, they had some games where they were getting torched. In the second half, they anchored down and were able to come from behind and win those games. We're starting to see old-school Pat Narduzzi defense, where they're outclassing opponents with their scheme. We'll start with the front 7. Rasheem Biles, Kyle Lewis at linebacker. These guys have been great. Jimmy Scott up front. Sincere Edwards, a freshman's been very impressive. Nate Matlock, a veteran. I mean, they're getting good play out of everybody. They also have a senior linebacker, Brandon George, who's playing at a nice level as the 4th leading tackler. A lot of youth here in this front 7, Nick, but they've been producing at a very high level. And again, the scheme has been outrageous. That was kind of the most impressive part about them last week, is the variety of different looks they were able to showcase, and really had a veteran quarterback, a good one, confused. So here against Kevin Jennings, I'm sure his diagnosing skills aren't up to par with that of Kyle McCord. So they're going to look to confuse him while also bringing some heat off the edge.
This is a strong unit that can bring a lot of heat off the edge, and they can get a lot of interceptions. They're really good at confusing the quarterback, like you said, with the sort of different looks they throw at you, and that is certainly proving to be a problem for some of the teams they've played so far this season. I like a lot of the pieces they have. Jimmy Scott, 16 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 pass breakups. Nate Matlock, 12 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Really good numbers there. Nick James, 8 total tackles plus a tackle for loss for him. I like the numbers I've seen. Isaiah Neal, Sincere Edwards are really solid pieces for this team as well. Edwards, a true freshman, 13 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Really liked what this unit's been able to do on the defensive line. They're able to get pressure. They're able to get in the backfield. They send some confusing looks. I like what this unit's been able to do so far.
Yeah, they're 9th nationally against the run. They've not really had any issues. Gave up 188 to West Virginia. 150 or less on the other games. So this is certainly a team that's faced some very good rushing attacks, and for the most part, they've held them in check. Facing another good one here. You look at the Pitt secondary, another group that we certainly wondered how they would perform, because over the last couple of years, Narduzzi, this was his bread and butter, being a coach in the back end, and they're finally starting to showcase some nice improvements. Ryland Gandy, Rashad Battle have been respectable at corner. Gandy has not been a good tackle or a good run defender, though, so that's maybe potentially an area they can look to expose. I think in the slot, you look at Kyle Lewis, the player we alluded to, there's plenty of versatility. For a linebacker, he leads them for most reps in the slot. Not a position they use a whole ton, but, Philip O'Brien, Javian McIntyre, they have a couple of different guys that will play that position. And then over at free safety, a veteran, Donovan McMillan, is one of the leaders on this defense. He's been phenomenal against the run in his own right, and he's one of the higher-ranked tacklers on this team. Secondary as well, Nick, they've not been that bad. Again, they're coming off a complete clinic. They had 64 pass attempts against them, held them to 55%, 321 yards. They haven't been perfect because they've allowed a good amount of yards in every single game, but they're not getting gashed by any means, and come the end of the game, they're usually locking down.
It's a very strong linebacking core and secondary. The top 8 tacklers on this team come from the secondary and linebacking core. Really good players across the board for this defense. Very physical. They get a lot of interceptions. They get a lot of pass breakups. They get some sacks as well. Donovan McMillan's been really good for this team. 62 total tackles, a pick, and 4 pass breakups. While Kyle Lewis, he's a do-it-all player. 60 total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, 3 picks. One of them took to the house, plus a pass breakup. Brandon George has been good, 52 total tackles and a pick for him. Rasheem Biles, 52 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, plus a pick, 6, 3 pass breakups. Rasheed Battle's been great as well in coverage, 6 pass breakups, 24 total tackles. McIntyre, Lovelace, PJ O'Brien and Rylan Gandy all have a bunch of tackles as well, plus O'Brien has a pick. This has been a really solid unit so far. I really like what this defense can do as a general. And it's a really strong Pitt defense. Pat Narduzzi knows how to coach a defense. They've been good, right? They've been really anchoring down, especially the last couple of weeks. They held Cal to 15 points. They held Syracuse to 13 points and gave Kyle McCord absolute headaches, one of the worst performances of his entire football life in that game, where they absolutely tortured him over and over again. They like their matchup here against Kevin Jennings potentially. They like the potential to win that matchup and have a really strong showing on Saturday.
Now you look at an SMU defense. And over the last couple of years, the Mustangs have really improved on this side of the ball. And, they still, entering a new conference, have been dominant. They've played some fair rushing attacks, BYU, TCU, Louisville. They've held them all in check. 2.7 yards per carry, 88 yards per game allowed. This is a team that's incredibly deep on the defensive line, like I alluded to earlier. Jared Harrison-Hunte from Miami has been a phenomenal player for them. Elijah Roberts, he's been an elite run defender. Of course, he's a high upside pass rusher as well. He's going to be playing in the NFL. Jafari Harvey, another Hurricane transfer, is playing a lot of minutes for them. Isaiah Smith, Cameron Robertson, guys like Corey Robertson and Anthony Booker. And you also have Mike Lockhart, who's a really good run defender. I mean, this is legitimately one of the deeper defensive lines in the country, Nick, and they've certainly been great against the run. Production certainly isn't maybe the greatest, about 6 tackle for loss per game. But they have a lot of different guys here. They have fresh bodies. They can play, how many ever deep for 4 quarters. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for Des Reed and a Pitt offense that might have to lean on the run game a little bit more.
They really can run deep here. They have a deep unit across the board that brings in a ton of different pieces that are really effective for this team. A lot of transfers that have plugged in and are playing really good football for this team. They rotate. They bring in a lot of different guys, big physical players that are really helping this team at Jared Harrison's been really good, 21 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss plus a sack and a pick for him. Elijah Roberts, 21 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Isaiah Smith, 19 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Cam Robertson, 18 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Jafari Harvey's been really good, 15 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Good numbers. Mike Lockhart, 15 total tackles. Anthony Booker has 8 total tackles plus a sack and a fumble recovery that he did return for a touchdown. So this is a unit that's very physical. They get in the backfield. They rough you up a little bit. I like the scheme they've been running. This is a solid 3-4 defense that is looking good early on. I like what this front part of this defense can do. This defensive line's deep. A lot of talented physical players here.
You look at the middle of this defense, this was a great linebacking group a season ago when that duo remained of Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson. Both are tremendous against the run, certainly less than desirable in coverage, and I certainly think that's an area that can certainly be exposed. Again, the aforementioned Des Reed, a very good pass catcher, someone they're going to look to target a lot, so he's got to be up to these linebackers to be efficient in tackling and being able to cover him. Alexander Kilgore, whenever he gets on the field, is also highly impressive as a run defender. So this is a great linebacking core, great front seven altogether. This is no joke of a defense, Nick. I know last year maybe you could say they played in the AAC or whatever. This year they're playing in the ACC. As of late playing some weaker offenses, but even against the tougher ones, these guys are still playing sound, consistent football.
They are playing sound, consistent football. I like this linebacking core a lot. Kobe Wilson, 52 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He got 2 picks, including a pick 6 there. He's been really solid in coverage as well. Ahmad Walker, 43 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a pick, and 2 pass breakups. Again, decent coverage asset. Alex Kilgore, probably your best run defender out of the 3 there. I like what he can do against the run. 29 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups. I think he's a big physical, solid asset that they rotate in and out. I do like this unit. I think he's a good sophomore. I think Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker, 2 experienced players. Wilson, the graduate senior, Walker, the senior himself. Really good unit across the board. I like this linebacking core. That's a nice trio there. It's 3 solid, hard-hitting players that have 2 of them that are great coverage assets, another really good run stopper. I like that mix a lot. I think it's solid.
Now you look at a SMU secondary that's been less than stellar. I think they give up almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to the Duke passing attack and Malik Murphy. I think that's a bit of an embarrassment. That's certainly not a great outing. They looked good against Stanford. Against Louisville, they gave up 300 plus yards in that one. TCU, they're playing from behind, so they're able to run up some numbers in that one. But this has still been a secondary that's allowed, a good amount of big plays, 121st in FBS and 40-plus yard passing plays allowed. Brandon Crossley, Deuce Harmon, these 2 corners haven't really been all that great. Jalen Davis Robinson, that is, he's not been any good when he's been the number 3 corner. He's been the biggest liability for them. Cale Sanders at safety is also really struggling in coverage, but he has a good player in terms of tackling and run defense abilities. And then you have two free safeties in Jonathan McGill, Isaiah Nwagbia, who are the best players on the team, who've been elite in coverage, have been great against the run as well. It's going to be on their shoulders to make plays. About Moses as well. This is a nice trio of safeties, Nick, that they can lean on, but the corners have been abysmal. And I promise you, Pitt's going to try to take advantage of that because they have some speed on the outside.
Yeah, this is certainly a concerning part. If Holstein is playing, I think he could really pick apart the secondary because they've been weak at times. They've got torched a few times. They've had some shaky performances as of late. Isaiah Nwagbia is a really solid player, top tackler on this team, 57 total tackles, 2 picks, a pass breakup for him, plus 1.5 tackles for loss. Ahmed Moses has been good, 38 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 picks. One of those a pick 6, 3 pass breakups. McGill's been really solid in coverage. 34 total tackles, 4 pass breakups, and a pick. Cale Sanders, 26 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and a pass breakup for him. Jalen Davis Robinson's been good, 18 total tackles, 4 pass breakups. Deuce Harmon's been solid, 17 total tackles, a pick, 3 pass breakups. Corey Robinson, a bit more shaky down there, 17 total tackles, 1 sack for him, a pick, and a pass breakup. While Brendan Crossley has been solid, rotational appearances, 14 total tackles, and 5 pass breakups, leads the team in that category. Overall, this secondary, I am worried about. I think this is a matchup that they could certainly be in trouble if Holstein's playing because he has been shown to torch some of these better secondaries throughout the season. That certainly is a potential matchup advantage for Pitt if you have Holstein playing. In general, though, the secondary, I think it's something that's going to be an issue later on the line. They might be fine in this game, but that's a secondary I'm keeping my eye on as we get closer to ACC title game, potentially more high-value games in the ACC and potential playoff appearance for SMU because that secondary could really let them down. It has been shaky and it's concerned me so far this season.
We're going to tail the tape, the team comparisons. You look at quarterback. Originally, I was going to go with Pitt with Holstein healthy. Still, not sure of his status. We'll just go ahead and call it even. Running back, I think SMU has an edge, even though Des Reed's a phenomenal player. A little bit deeper there over at SMU. Pitt at wide receiver. O-line will go in favor of the Mustangs, and I called defensive line and linebacker even, while Pitt gets the nod in the secondary. It's really going to come down to defense in this game, Nick, and these teams are pretty clear-cut, similar. So do you think these are, good, or do you think that someone has a more clear advantage on that side of the ball?
Yeah, so 2 flips for me. I think linebacker, I think linebacker goes to SMU, in my opinion. I think that linebacking core is really solid. I think Kilgore is just a bit of a difference maker as a rotational piece. I really like the depth he provides. I like Wilson and Walker, 2 really good leaders. And then I'm going to flip running back to Pitt as well. I think Reed is just that talented of a player. He really does lead the way. I think the running back room for SMU is great, but I really think Reed is that huge difference maker. And they're going to rely on him a lot in this game if Holstein's not playing. So he could really be that major X factor. If he has a great day, it could certainly carry Pitt to a victory. Those are the only 2 things I'm going to disagree with you there. The rest of it, I like it across the board. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Now, looking at the final thoughts and the prediction, your keys to the game for Pitt: continue to outclass opponents with the scheme, just like they did last week. And then let Holstein cook, and if he doesn't play, it's going to be let Yarnell cook. And I think with these receivers and the liabilities in the secondary, it's going to be the best game plan for you. For SMU, run game be stout. Need to have a more consistent pass rush as well. And this is a tough game to predict because I think that Pitt's kind of being undervalued. Even with a backup quarterback, I think they can compete in this game a great deal. I think SMU, they've just found their footing a little bit more on offense, while Pitt are kind of struggling coming into this game. Last week was a clear defensive victory for them. The offense really wasn't even on the field that much because they had like 3 pick sixes or something. So, that's how good the defense was last week. I think the under is a great play in this game. I think SMU will win. I think if Holstein plays, I think that Pitt will probably win themselves. I'm just not sure he will be able to. And even if he does, how, will he be 100%? Because his legs will be key, 3rd and 4th and shorts. If they're not able to convert on those, I can easily change the tide of this game. So I'm going to stick with SMU, Nick, a major game in the ACC, one that no one's talking about. But both of these teams are firmly in the playoff race. And Pitt, they host Clemson in a couple of weeks. So these are legit contenders for the CFP, Nick, regardless of name, brand, or whatever you may say. You look at the favorites in the conference, these guys can play their way in.
These are legit contenders in the ACC. I think it's a bit of a disservice. This game's on the ACC network on in the evening slate. I think it's a little bit unfair. Probably should have got the bump to ESPN or even ESPN2, quite frankly, because this is a really important game. Having it on what it really is a regional cable network. I know you can get it on satellite TV or whatever, but it is a regional cable network for the ACC network. Really, you got to be in that market to typically have it. I'm lucky that I have it in my cable package, so I'll be watching this game. I'll be focusing on it. I think this is a really good game in this late slate on Saturday night. These are 2 really fun teams. I think if Holstein plays, this could be a lot closer of a game. I'm going to take SMU with the points right now because I do think this offense firing on all cylinders right now. I am worried about the secondary. I think that certainly is a big key battle point potentially. I also think if Reed has a good day, that could definitely change the tides of this game. But these are 2 real teams that are contending in the conference. I like what SMU's been able to do. They looked weak early on, but they've turned it around. The offense is firing on all cylinders. Defense is playing really good football, which is something they were doing early on, but the offense was struggling. Pitt, they've been the complete surprise package this year. Never expected them to be this good. This team is playing phenomenal football. If Holstein is healthy, they could really easily win this game, in my opinion. They could keep it really close. If he's not healthy, it certainly changes it. We saw what that defense did against a great quarterback in Kyle McCord last week. Had him seeing ghost all night long. Certainly could do that against Jennings, who has shown tendencies to throw a couple picks every once in a while. This is a very fun game. I'm looking forward to this one. A key game going on in Dallas for the ACC, a key game for college football in general. A really nice matchup on Saturday night at 8 o'clock.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.